Welcome again, everybody. We've got another group presentation this time. Claudia, Myra, Dallas, and Bo will be presenting. So I'll go ahead and turn the time on over to you guys.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, our group is going to talk about Medicare and Medicaid. So next slide, please. Okay, so what CMS stands for? It stands for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and it's part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. CMS oversees many federal healthcare programs, including those that involve health information technology, such as the Meaningful Use Incentive Program for Electronic Health Records. Next slide, please. Okay, what is Medicare? It was created in 1965 by former President Lyndon B. Johnson. Medicare was created to provide health care for people on Social Security. It works like health insurance, but instead the government pays doctors and hospitals. According to the National Academy of Social Insurance, it was created when people over 65 found it virtually impossible to get private health insurance coverage. The program was created during an era when the big financial worry was that an illness might put someone in the hospital and generate huge bills. I don't think that has changed a lot lately, but this was a period before the widespread use of prescription drugs to combat illness. The basic design of the Medicare program was modeled on the private insurance system in place in the 1960s. Next slide, please. Who benefits from Medicare? People 65 and older, individuals under 65 with end-stage renal disease, and people under 65 with certain disabilities. Next slide, please. What are the components of Medicare? It has 4 components, A, B, C, and D. Part A covers hospital insurance, and this includes inpatient hospital stays, skilled nursing facility stays, hospice care, and home health visits. And it is financed by 1.45% payroll tax on wage and salary income for the worker and the employer. That means that if you pay 145%, the employer has to match the same amount, or if you're self-employed, then you pay 2.9% of your earnings. Part B pays for outpatient care and doctor services. Part C, also known as Medical Advantage Plan, or MA, gives senior the option of receiving their benefits through private health plans. It's like having an HMO or a PPO plan. It combines Part A, B, and sometimes Part C. Part D provides prescription drug benefits through private plans that contract with Medicare and Medicare Advantage prescription drug plans. Part A is free, and Part B, C, and D are optional, so you will have to pay for those if you want to get them. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is chart with 3 different coverage options, and coverage 1, it's Part A, includes Part A, B, and Part D, which is Part A, hospital insurance provided by the government. The same with Part B, medical insurance provided by the government. And Part D is private insurance providing prescription drug coverage. The second option is Part A, Part B, Part D, plus Medicare supplement. And coverage number 3 is Medicare Part C, Medicare Advantage prescription drug plans. And it includes hospital insurance, medical insurance, prescription drug coverage, and reduce or limit out-of-pocket medical costs. And it's provided by 1 private insurance company. And next slide, please. And this chart talks about the total Medicare benefit payments. This was in 2014, and it consists of Medicare benefit spending on hospice, durable medical equipment, Part B drugs, outpatient dialysis, ambulance, lab services, and other Part B services. and also includes the effect of sequestration on spending for Medicare benefits and amounts paid to provide and recovered. And next slide.
Okay, it's my turn. I'm going to talk about facts on Medicare spending and financing. Medicare is funded primarily from three sources. General revenues is 41%, payroll taxes 38%, and beneficiary premiums. In the chart, we can see the general revenue, and the non-medical payroll is now the largest source of Medicare financing. You can see in the 1970, the Medicare was 62%, the general revenue 25%, and the premiums 14%. In 2014, you can see Medicare payroll taxes is 39%, other it was 5%, premiums 14%, and general revenue 42%. In 2015, they say about the current law, it's going to be Medicare payroll taxes 28%, other 7%, and premiums 17%, and general revenue 48%. Okay, next slide. Medicare share of the federal budget is projected to increase from 40.3% in 2015 to 15.2% in 2024, while Medicare spending as a share of GDP, gross domestic product, is projected to increase from 3.0% in 2015 to 3.3% in 2024. Medicare is 14% of the federal budget. Between 2010 and 2030, the number of people on Medicare is projected to rise from 46 million to 78 million. According to Kaiser Family Foundation, Medicare Part A, a hospital insurance fund, will have insufficient funds to pay for full benefits beginning in 2019. Next slide, please. How is Medicare funded? Okay, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, a branch of Department of Health and Human Services, is the federal agency that runs the Medicare program and monitors Medicaid programs offered by each state. Medicare is paid by two trust funds, accounts held by the U.S. Treasury. These funds can only be used for Medicare, hospital insurance, trust fund, and supplementary medical insurance trust fund. The hospital insurance payroll taxes paid by the most employees and employers and people who are self-employed. Other sources like income taxes paid in Social Security benefits, interest earned on the trust fund investment, and Medicare Part A premiums from people who aren't eligible for premium-free Part A. Supplementary medical insurance. Funds authorized by Congress premiums from people enrolled in Medicare Part B, medical insurance, and Medicare prescription drug coverage, Part D, and other sources like interest earned on the trust fund investment. Okay, next slide.
Now on to Medicaid. This is a slide just to briefly describe what Medicaid is, we've already talked about it in this class, but to reiterate, Medicaid is the nation's primary health insurance program for persons with disabilities and low-income populations. The program currently covers 6 million low-income Americans, including nearly 30 million low-income children, 15 million adults, and 8 million non-elderly people with disabilities. So there's a couple of different numbers for Americans. The federal government sets minimum eligibility levels for coverage, and then states have the option to expand eligibility. Medicaid is jointly funded by states and the federal government, and the federal government pays an average of 57% of Medicaid costs, with an average of 50 to 76%. So a couple of other numbers for you. Next slide.
Yeah, so how is Medicaid funded? There's a few ways. The first is federal medical assistance percentage. The federal government guarantees matching funds to states for qualifying Medicaid expenditures. Guaranteed at least funds for every dollar in state spending on the program. share hospital payments is another. The law calls for an in federal DSH allotments across all states, regardless of whether the state has expanded or not. Financing of the non-federal share. States have flexibility into determining the sources of funding for the non-federal share of medical spending. The primary source of funding for the non-federal share comes from state general fund appropriations. Thanks.
All right. So for eligibility, as you look to the right, there's a couple of people, kind of stereotypical people that you would see that would use Medicaid. But to briefly talk about it, those that are eligible is those that enroll must be a member of a category defined by the statute. Medicaid is a joint federal state program that provides health coverage or nursing home coverage to certain categories of low asset people. Some of these categories include low income children, like we've already talked about, below a certain age, pregnant women, parents of Medicaid eligible children who meet certain income requirements, and low income seniors. The details of how each category is defined vary from state to state, so there's not a defined line for eligibility. For the U.S. People with disabilities who do not have a work history and who receive supplemental security income, or what's known as SSI, are enrolled in Medicaid as a mechanism to provide them with the proper health insurance they need. Next slide.
Yeah, so Medicaid's benefits reflect the needs of the population it serves. So there's this little chart here that has 3 different separations. The first is low income families, which in prenatal care and delivery cost, children, routine and specialized care for childhood development, such as like shots, dental, vision, and speech therapy. Then the last one is families, affordable coverage to prepare for the unexpected, like emergency dental, hospitalizations, and antibiotics. The second division is individuals with disabilities, like autistic children in home therapy, speech and occupational therapy, cerebral palsy assistance to gain independence, such as personal care, case management and assistive technology, aids, physician services, prescription drugs, and the last in that section is mental illnesses, such as prescription drugs and physician services. And the third is elderly individuals, covering medical beneficiary, helping pay for Medicare premiums and cost sharings, community waiver participant, community-based care and personal care, and the last nursing home resident. Medicaid, since Medicare does not cover institutional care. Next slide.
All right, now we're going to talk about, for Medicaid, some of the problems that arise because of just what Medicaid is. And just to briefly read, Medicaid has a few problems singular to its foundation. Medicare is mainly funded federally. Unlike Medicaid, it shares federal, state, and we're going to just briefly talk about some of the problems that it faces. Next slide.
So the first one is controlling cost. Medicaid is one of the largest items in state budgets, although its beneficiaries lack political clout. Soar during economic downturns as an enrollment increases when people lose jobs and their health benefits. In return, that puts states in a because they struggle to keep up with their higher cost as their tax revenues decline. Medicaid enrollment and cost grew markedly during the last recession, and enrollment shot up further since 2014 as a result of the 2010 health law. Although the federal government pays the full cost of newly eligible enrollees through 2016. States typically try to control costs by cutting payment rates to doctors and hospitals or reducing benefits, which can have negative effects on enrollees by making it harder to get care. Next slide.
Okay, so as we know, with the president, Obamacare became a thing. So getting states to expand income eligibility under Obamacare This one I will definitely read because it definitely explains it really, really well. The Supreme Court's 2012 ruling that states could decide whether to participate in the health law's Medicaid expansion impaired Democrats' efforts to expand eligibility nationwide. 20 states, mostly in the South and interior West, have refused to participate, citing concerns about the program's effectiveness and costs. As a result, more than 4 million people have been left without health insurance because they don't make enough to qualify for federal subsidies to buy private coverage on the health laws exchanges, even though they are ineligible for state Medicare programs. Some states, such as Texas and Florida, are the two largest states that declined to expand the program. And President Barack Obama has accused state Republican leaders of playing politics, but few GOP leaders have budgeted. Next slide.
Okay, the next problem is better oversight of managed care. More than half of Medicaid enrollees now get care through private managed care companies. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, the CHN is a program of the foundation. While the insurers tout their ability to offer budget predictability, questions remain of how well the companies improve quality and control costs. In managed care, health plans are paid to set monthly rate to cover each enrollee's medical needs. The Obama administration has recently proposed rules that would limit how much these plans may spend on administrative costs and set standards to ensure enrollees have adequate to hospitals and doctors, similar to those for private plans. Report by the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services found widespread inaccuracies in Medicaid managed care plans provider directories. Half of the doctors listed in the directories were unavailable because providers were not at the location, network, or were no longer taking new patients. Next slide.
Okay, so now talking about doctors and dentists, how this affects them. There's a couple of fun numbers here, but it's really hard for people that are on Medicaid to get accepted from doctors and dentists, except for Wyoming. As you look down in kind of the middle of the paragraph, in a 2012 federal study, just 40% of New Jersey doctors accepted new Medicaid patients. So very, very few people were accepted in New Jersey from that study. But compared to Wyoming, 99% of them accepted Medicaid. So that's a huge, huge difference. And it just varies between state to state. While the federal government requires states to offer dental coverage for children, adults are coverage is optional. So children are good, but adults are not. Even when states offer adult coverage, patients often struggle to find dentists willing to see them because of low payment rates, much like Medicare. In many places, community health centers have helped to meet the growing need for dental care, but patients can face long waits. Next slide.
Okay, and then the next one is meeting growing demand for long-term care. So while Medicaid is often typecast as helping poor inner-city families, it also is a safety net for millions of middle-class people who need long-term care at home or in nursing homes. More than 60% of nursing home residents rely on Medicaid for assistance. With the aging of the population accelerating in the next 2 decades, the demand for long-term care is expected to soar. While states have made progress shifting enrollees nursing homes to long-term care services at home, more needs. Next slide.
And this slide really just defines everything that we've talked about, really summarized into just one picture with Medicaid on the left and Medicaid on the right, Medicare on the left, and then in the middle of how they are similar. So this just brings our whole PowerPoint just to this one picture to really summarize and make it simple for us to understand what it does, how they're different, and how they're much alike. Next slide.
Yeah. Okay. So this is also one very similar to that. I'm going to read the top part first. Dual eligibles receive coverage from Medicare and Medicaid. They make up about 18% of Medicaid enrollment, but consume nearly 30% of program spending. So it kind of goes over a little bit in there. Elderly or disabled, 47 million people, total spending, 520 billion, that's federal, administrated by federal government. And then you got those that can both Medicare and Medicaid, low income and elderly disabled, 9 million people, 239 billion. And then you have Medicaid, which is low income, 3 million people, total spending, 400 billion. And then administrated by state and federal governments. And this is done by the Kaiser Family Foundation. Next slide.
And those are our references.
Yep.
All right, cool. Good job, everybody.
Thanks.
Let's just look for maybe just one or two questions. One of the questions that came to my mind as you were talking about Medicaid and dentists, why would you say that, for example, Wyoming is accepting new Medicaid patients where other states may not be? Have you seen any reasoning behind it?
Yeah, I think when I was looking at this, a lot of it, Wyoming is, I believe, very Republican. Is that right?
I would imagine they are.
And so
They
with
are.
that, a lot of people believe that with a Republican kind of a mindset that people need to work for their money and not just get free things. And so it could be that kind of a mindset for the whole state of the doctors that live there still have that mindset to not give their services to those that the government just freely gives their money to. That's just my opinion. It could be wrong, but that was just one of my thoughts.
So Wyoming would accept 99%. Is that correct? Of Medicaid?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Can you go back to that slide? Okay, here we go.
So we got 40% of New Jersey would probably be rather liberal.
Oh,
Except for new Medicaid patients compared to 99% in Wyoming. So
well,
does anyone have any thoughts on that?
yeah, that stumps my opinion. I'm not sure.
It sounded good until we got the facts going.
Let's see.
You know, honestly, I don't know exactly the answer for this, and it'd be interesting to see. I would imagine Wyoming is probably a lower cost of living as a whole. It's considered more of a rural area. And so Medicaid is directed more towards those who don't have a high income. And maybe the dentists who choose to be dentists in that area have a bit of understanding. And maybe a big majority or a larger majority of people in Wyoming are on Medicaid. So in order for them to actually have patients or have an acceptable amount of patients, they may be more willing to. But I mean, that's a huge difference, 40% to practically every dentist in Wyoming.
I wanted to add to that we learned that they cover more children than adults. So maybe that's the reason why families have many children in the household. So maybe that's a reason why. I just thought that would be, yeah.
And so another question that I have is, you hear a lot about how healthcare within the Americas is broken. A big part of it is the spending or people taking advantage of the free healthcare that they have. You hear that as being an issue all the time, but you don't hear a lot of resolutions or a lot of suggestions. So I guess let's just open it up a little bit. Do you feel like healthcare is somewhat broken as far as that goes? Do you feel like people take advantage of, we'll just focus more on Medicaid more so than Medicare? And then what kind of suggestions can there be to help fix if there is a problem?
I used to work for a grocery store a long time ago. I was a cashier, and I got people paying with food stamps all the time, and they will buy their
beer, their cigarettes, the cigars.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Their
And
steaks, their lobsters.
that made me mad all the time because people was paying cash for beer and just buying their regular basic groceries with their food stamps. And I thought that's broken, that cannot happen. And I thought they need to have a more severe vigilance on that. Something has to be done because that cannot be possible. People have cash to pay for things, for beer and for chips and for junk food, and they don't want to pay for it for the regular basic stuff. So yeah, something needs to be done.
Anyone else have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that answer can be answered differently with each person, whatever their political views are. But I would definitely have to agree with getting more detailed in the eligibility of these kinds of things. For me personally, do believe that there are some people that really need help and they don't have enough money, and they're good, hardworking people. But also at the same time, there's also that what Cloudy was talking about, of those that may not work as hard and aren't using their money correctly for the best reason. So I think one of the ways to best make it more and correct those problems is to make it more detailed to where the necessities are first met, and then the wants are kind of second, where people would have to actually work for those and try their best for it.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everybody. I will let you guys off the hook and let you go enjoy the rest of your day today. Great work, and thanks for hanging out with me.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well
Thank
done.
you guys.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
Bye. Bye, thanks.